Hello and welcome, I'm your CodeMonkey. In this lecture we're going to learn the basics of Unity. Now like I said, this part is technically optional. If you're just looking to learn C#, then technically you don't need to learn Unity. But since I won't be using Unity to build the interactive exercises, and also using it to showcase some example code with some fun visuals to help you learn better, because of that, even if you don't specifically want to learn Unity, still make sure to watch this lecture just so you're not confused when any Unity code shows up. First, we need to get Unity Hub. Now, since we selected Unity Game Development when we installed Visual Studio, it already automatically installed Unity Hub. In your case, if you accidentally did not tick that box, you can just manually go to unity.com and download it. Then open up Unity Hub. This is the program that manages all of the various Unity versions. In case you see something that looks like this is actually the older version of the hub. So like it says here, there's a button to update, so let's do that. And yep, here we are in the updated Unity Hub. It asks you to sign in, so go ahead and do that. If you don't have an account, you can create one, it's free. Unity itself has a free personal version, so you don't have to pay anything. Go ahead, create an account and log in, and right away it selects a version to install. Here you can install this version right away, but we're actually going to install a specific version that might or might not be the same as the pre-selected version, depending on when you're watching this. So over here, either way, you can either install or skip this. Then here we have Unity Hub open. On the left side, we have some buttons. We can manage our account, we can install various Unity versions, or check out the projects. So over here on the Projects tab, we can add a project. On the premium version of this course, you can download the companion project. Here in the free version, let's just look at how that works, and you can create an empty Unity project instead. So go ahead and download that. It's a simple zip file. Just open it and extract it somewhere. And now back here in Unity Hub, let's go in the Projects tab, and then up here, let's add a project. Select the one we just downloaded, and let's open. Okay, yep, so here it is. And over here, it says the version that this project was built with. If you don't have this version, you can click this button to download it. And yep, it will download the correct Unity version. Now, technically, I should say you can load the project with a later Unity version. Doesn't specifically have to be this one, but in order to avoid any confusion with menus being in different places, in order to avoid any of that, I highly encourage you to use the exact same version. Like I said, here in the free version, just create a brand new empty project instead. So there it is, everything is installed, everything is ready. So now we can click to open up this project. And yep, here is the project open. Now let's just do a little bit more setup. For example, let's go up top over here and let's go into edit, and then let's open up the preferences. Then over here on this window on the left side, let's scroll down into external tools. And over here for the external script editor, make sure you select your Visual Studio installation. Or if you prefer, you can obviously use a different IDE. But if you're following everything along with this course, make sure you select Visual Studio, okay? Then for the extra options, you can leave everything like this. And here's a screenshot of my general options. I believe all of this is the default. So now we can close this window. And now if we have correctly set the external editor, if we go up here into assets and then click on open C# project, yep, this one should open your Visual Studio. Okay, great. So far so good. Now just one thing, you should already see the code kind of like this, meaning with a bunch of colors. So for example, if I place the mouse over here on top of mono behavior, it should correctly identify this as a class inside Unity Engine. This is a Unity specific class. If you don't see it, if you mouse over this and doesn't recognize this type, or if you see this as written in Camille Gray, if so, then perhaps something went wrong during installation, so you might need to manually install the Visual Studio Tools for Unity. You can just Google Visual Studio Tools for Unity, you'll be able to find this page and you can download it. But if you followed everything, then everything should be working correctly. Okay, great. Okay, so here we have the default Unity layout. Now, first things first, let's just familiarize ourselves with the various Unity windows and create our custom layout. You can see there's a lot of tabs everywhere, like for example, the Scene tab, the Game tab, and so on. You can click and drag and move these tabs anywhere. You can make them into separate places, or you can dock them into various kinds of places. So you can basically set up the editor in any way you want, but it will be easier to follow this course if you're following the same layout as me. So let's see the layout that I normally use. First is over here, the inspector on the right side. This way we always have a nice view of the selected object and whatever scripts it has. Then for the hierarchy, personally, I prefer that instead of here, I click and drag and I put it right here next to this one. I like having the hierarchy over here on this lower left corner. We're going to make sure our scene is always organized, so we don't need the hierarchy to take up tons of space. Then with the project files next to it, and with the console tab on the next tab. Next over here in the center, here we have the scene view, and right next to it the game view. This way we can easily view all of our objects, the console project, everything is nicely accessible. So this is the basic layout that I normally use. Now for just a couple more options. Over here when the project files window is selected, on these three dots on the top right corner, on these personally I like to select the one column layout. It showcases all the project files in a nice compact view. Then on the console next to it, once again on the three dots, over here we have some options. For example, over here on the log entry, I like to set it to 1. This makes the console nice and compact, which personally I prefer. You can see a bunch more logs without taking up too much space. Then the timestamp, either enable or disable, doesn't really matter. One very important thing are these three buttons over here. These are the type of messages that are going to appear on the console. So the left one, this one is for regular messages. We're going to use this quite a lot. The second one is for warnings, and finally for errors. Basically, if you untoggle any of these, then those types of messages will not show up over here on the console. So if you ever come across an issue where nothing is showing up up on the console, make sure these 3 buttons are ticked. Then over here on the left side, for the clear, we have some options. So on this little arrow, I like to set it to clear on play, which means the console will be cleared every time we start playing our game. Then for the collapse, this one basically collapses messages that are exactly the same into just one entry. Personally, I do not like this. I think this is very confusing. I want to be able to see every single message as it comes out, even if it's identical to a previous one. I've also seen this lead to a lot of confusion for a lot of beginners. They think their code is just firing one message, when in reality it's actually firing hundreds. So to avoid any confusion, leave collapse untoggled. And then for the error pause, this will automatically pause the game when some kind of error occurs. So for this one, you should definitely have this toggled. If there is an error, you want to know about it. You want to know when it happens so you can actually fix it. Okay, so that's it for the console. And now on the game view up here, and over here on the button that says free aspect, let's select full HD 1920 by 1080. This is the standard 16:9 aspect ratio. Then on that same button, you can also enable VSync. This can be helpful because some of these demos are really simple, so if you disable it, they might run at like 1000 frames per second, which is going to put a ton of unneeded stress on your graphics card, so just leave it as VSync. And then just one thing, if you see your game view is looking a little bit too pixelated, make sure on this here, on this slider, you are not fully zoomed in. If I fully zoom in, I can see this becomes a little bit pixelated. This is basically just increasing the size of this window. So on this one on the scale, make sure it's pushed all the way to the left. Okay, so that's the game view setup. Then for the scene view, for this one, pretty much on default, should work just fine. Just one thing to know, some demos are in 2D. So for that, up here on the top right corner, there's a button to swap between 2D or 3D. This just changes the scene camera. And then one important thing is on the top left corner, over here, there's these 2 buttons. This impacts where the handles are actually going to show up. Usually you want to keep them just like this, meaning this one on pivot and this one on local. If you ever see your handles on some weird places, always come back to this. You almost always want it to be on pivot and local. Okay, so here we have our basic layout. It will be easier to follow the course if you're using the exact same layout as me, so ideally you should be using this. But again, all the windows are customizable, so if there's something you absolutely prefer differently, then go ahead. You can drag your windows and place them anywhere. Once you have a layout you're happy with, you can go on the top right corner, and over here where it says default, you can click on it, and we can basically save a layout. So you can go ahead, save it to something, and then if you ever find any issues, you can reload a previous layout. So here we're back into default, and if I click it, yep, now back into this one. Okay, so now that the layout is all set up, let's go through the basics of the Unity editor. So first, just some basic controls. Over here with the scene view selected, this is where we can move around and view the entire game world. You can hold the right mouse button in order to look around. Then if you're holding the right mouse button, you can press WAS and D in order to move around. If you press on shift, it increases the speed. While holding the mouse button, if you use the scroll wheel, you can either increase or decrease the speed. Alternatively, you can stop holding the right mouse button and just press the middle mouse button in order to pan around, or hold Alt and left click in order to rotate around any kind of object. And if you have some kind of object over here on the hierarchy, if you get lost, like for example you're moving way far away and you have no idea where the object is, you can just select it and then press the F key and it's automatically going to focus that object. Then here on the hierarchy window, this shows all of the game objects that exist in this scene. A game object is really just a name for an object in Unity. So each one of these, each one is a separate game object. To create a game object, we can simply click on the plus icon, and over here we got a bunch of presets, like for example inside the 3D object, let's create the 3D cube. Let's press F in order to zoom in onto it. Yep, there you go, there's the basic cube. When an object is selected, we can see the various gizmos, the various handles that we can move our object. So over here, by clicking and dragging on these arrows, we can move our object in any way. Then on the left side, we see the various tools. So the first one is just for panning around. The second one is the move tool, so we can use it to move our object. Third one is for rotating in any way. Then we've got the scale tool, we can scale in any direction. Then the rect tool, this one is mostly used for 2D and UI stuff, but yeah, pretty much also does some scaling. And then the multi-tool, which contains pretty much everything. Another similar one for editing the bounce volume. Although this one only affects the collider and not the actual visual mesh, so you should probably not be using this one. Okay, so with the game object selected, over here on the inspector, we can see a bunch of stats for this game object. Unity is really based on components. So here we can see all of the various components attached to this game object. Each component does all kinds of things. For example, this cube game object, first of all, this one has a transform component. All game objects are going to have this component. This is basically what gives it a position, rotation, and scale. Then specifically for this game object, this one, as we can see, it has a cube visual. So that visual is composed of the cube mesh filter component. This is what holds the actual mesh that is being rendered, and the mesh render component. This is what actually renders that mesh. And finally, by default, this one also has a box collider, which is used in physics. So in general, the main thing to remember is that Unity is made up of scenes. Then each scene is made up of game objects, and each game object is made up of components. Let's see an example from the interactive exercise. They're all split into different scenes. They're organized by folders. So for example, let's go inside the lecture teaching all about if conditions, and let's open up this one for the distance. The way we open a scene scene is just with a double click, and we can see this is a scene because it has a nice Unity logo. So let's go. In this case, I don't want to save the sample scene, and here appears the scene. And like I said, most of the demos, these are actually in 2D, so we can click the 2D button in order to visualize it in 2D. In order to play the game, you simply click on the play button right up here on the middle, and you appear the game view now is playing on whatever logic is in this particular scene. This one is on the lecture talking about ifs, and if I click to move, and showcase how doing a simple if in order to test the distance. So in this case, for example, let's inspect the player component. So select the player game object on the hierarchy, and over here on the inspector, we can see it as a player script, so we can double click in order to open it. And yep, it opens up Visual Studio and opens up to the player script. So here we can see a bunch of code. Again, don't worry too much about what exactly this is saying, what exactly this is doing. This course won't teach you everything about C#, so everything that we're seeing here, we're going to learn about through the entirety of this course. Right now, the only thing that I want you to learn with regards to Unity and C# is that Unity scripts have some default functions. They've got an awake function and an update function. Again, I won't cover what exactly are functions in detail in a little bit, so just know that the awake or also the start function, those only run once, whereas the update is going to run on every frame. So if our Unity window is running on 60 frames per second, then this code will execute 60 times per second. Then for some Unity specific things, in order for a script to be attached as a component, it needs to extend this MonoBehavior class. In the Unity scripts, many times we are going to access the transform component. So this refers to the transform component attached to whatever game object this script is attached to. And finally, debug.log. This is just a way that we can write any messages to the console. So pretty much the same thing as the console write line that we're going to see in a little bit. Okay, so that's the absolute basics of Unity. Like I said, you can use C# without Unity. I'm only using it to make the interactive exercises and to make the lectures a bit more visual, which should help you learn better. Also, by the way, after you watch this whole course, if you want to learn how to make games in Unity, then check out my entire course on making the game Kitchen Chaos. It's a beginner course starting from the absolute basics of Unity and game development, and it takes you step by step until we have a nice, complete, fun game. If you fully understand everything in this course, you won't be able to easily understand everything in that one. Okay, so in this lecture, we installed Unity and learned the basics. Now we are ready to learn how the interactive exercises work, which we're going to see in the next lecture.